And it occurs to me that a lot of what we experience in life, and we can just view it as good luck, we can view it through, as any result, a result of any number of human causes. You can always kind of find a human reason why something has taken place. Or you can see this as God at work, and you think, especially in terms of even the difficulties, that God has allowed this to happen to help me grow, or the blessings that this is from the hand of God. And so I'm not necessarily one to immediately say, well, God did it, maybe to a fault. But what a great perspective to see God's hand in the middle of the good things. Some things are just so incredibly miraculous that, of course, that's a God deal. But even in the everyday blessings, that God provides our daily bread, that God's protecting us, that God is directing our steps. So, from Quo Vadis, how do you see your life? How do you see your current circumstances, the events that have gone on? I mean, do you see God in the middle of it all? I hope you do, because Jesus promises that He will never leave or forsake us. Blessings on your week.
Good morning. It's good to be with you this morning. Welcome to everybody who's worshiping with us online as well. Probably would have been good to introduce that video in case you've missed it. As we're doing this Deuteronomy series, as we look at Moses' final words to the people of Israel, some of us thought it might be kind of nice to get some words from Pastor Mark as he's wrapping up his role as lead pastor, about to retire. And so I think we had to kind of talk him into this. He calls it words of unsolicited advice, but we call it words of wisdom from the guy who's been shepherding us for these 40 plus years. And so that's what we're doing. And sometimes you'll notice that they kind of connect with the message of the day or the message from last week. And if you missed any of them, you can see those, find those online. Just go to mypeacechurch.com and you can find those there as well. Today, we're in Deuteronomy chapter 5, and I'm going to read a whole chapter to you. It's long, but I think it's important to get the entire context that Moses sets around as he shares with the people of Israel, once again, what we call the Ten Commandments. So let's hear from God's word. And Moses summoned all Israel and said to them, "Hear, O Israel, the statutes and the rules that I speak in your hearing today, and you shall learn them and be careful to do them. The Lord our God made a covenant with us in Horeb. Not with our fathers did the Lord make this covenant, but with us who are all of us here alive today. The Lord spoke with you face to face at the mountain, out of the midst of the fire, while I stood between the Lord and you at that time, to declare to you the word of the Lord. For you were afraid because of the fire, and you did not go up into the mountain." He said, "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Observe the Sabbath day and keep it holy, as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath day to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, or your male servant or your female servant, or your ox or your donkey, or any of your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates, that your male servant and your female servant may rest as well as you. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. Honor your father and your mother as the Lord your God commanded you, that your days may be long, and that it may go well with you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. And you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, And you shall not desire your neighbor's house in his field, his male servant or his female servant, his ox or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. These words the Lord spoke to all your assembly at the mountain out of the midst of the fire, the cloud and the thick darkness, with a loud voice, and he added no more. And he wrote them on 2 tablets of stone and gave them to me. And as soon as you heard the voice out of the midst of the darkness, while the mountain was burning with fire, you came near to me, all the heads of your tribes and your elders, and you said, Behold, the Lord our God has shown us his glory and his greatness, and we have heard his voice out of the midst of the fire. This day we have seen God speak with man, and man still live. Now therefore, why should we die? For this great fire will consume us. If we hear the voice of the Lord our God anymore, we shall die. For who is there of all flesh that has heard the voice of the living God, speaking out of the midst of the fire as we have, and has still lived? Go near and hear all that the Lord your God will say, and speak to us all that the Lord our God will speak to you. And we will hear and do it. And the Lord heard your words when you spoke to me, and the Lord said to me, I have heard the words of this people which they have spoken to you. They are right in all that they have spoken. Oh, that they had such a heart as this always, to fear me and keep my commandments, that it might go well with them and with their descendants forever. Go and say to them, Return to your tents. But you stand here by me, and I will tell you the whole commandment and the statutes and the rules that you shall teach them, that they may do them in the land that I am giving them to possess. You shall be careful, therefore, to do as the Lord your God has commanded you. You shall not turn aside to the right hand or to the left. You shall walk in all the way that the Lord your God has commanded you, that you may live and that it may go well with you, and that you may live long in the land that you shall possess. This is God's word for us today. There's a green message outline that you may have picked up along with the bulletin board today. I invite you to take that out in case you'd like to use it to follow along. Also remind you that on the back of that, we have suggested daily Bible readings for the week, along with some reflection questions to go with that. Maybe not everybody thinks this way, but I think that it's a wonderful thing, a sweet thing, kind of a beautiful thing when you see an infant discover their fingers and their thumb, and that they could put that thumb or maybe a couple fingers in their mouth and suck on it, and suddenly they find it's a way they can soothe themselves, to calm themselves down. And I say that partially because I had at least one child that, boy, we desperately needed him to find that so that he could soothe himself, because he struggled with being kind of upset kid a lot as a very young infant. It can be a great blessing for parents, for sure. But you know, it's not so wonderful when time goes by and that infant grows up into a toddler and then older and is still sucking their thumb. We all probably have a different opinion of when is it appropriate or inappropriate for a child to still be sucking their thumb. But probably everybody would agree by the time that child is going to school, kindergarten, maybe it's not the best thing for them. Can be an issue, can cause a number of problems. We had the child that was a tough habit to break for. And we worked on how could we do this, and ultimately we found an effective motivation for change. We made a promise. We said, hey, you want to play video games. We don't have video game in the house, but we will buy one, and we will plug it in if and only if and when you stop sucking your thumb, and then we'll let you use it. It worked. And there was much rejoicing for a while. Later on, we kind of realized that basically what we had done is we just kind of helped him exchange one addiction for another, which is a whole other story. But the question then is, well, why? Why do we do that? Well, we entered into this kind of a transactional relationship for a little bit, a two-sided promise, using the words of Deuteronomy, a covenant, if you will, because we wanted what was best for him. We wanted to get him out of something that was going to be problematic moving forward. We wanted him to have a healthier life. But behind that, you see, was another covenant, if you will, another promise that hadn't really been made in any kind of official way that I recall, but it was a promise in our hearts that we were going to love this child no matter what. And that we would work as parents to do the best we could for his well-being. Now, you can debate if how we handled the thumb-sucking issue was the best for him or not, but that was the point. The point was out of a promise of love to help him to grow into a healthy person. I was thinking about the people of Israel in Moses and God leading them from Egypt through the wilderness to the promised land. And I was thinking that it seems like the people of Israel were kind of like infants when God pulled them out of Egypt. They had been surrounded and steeped in the religion of the Egyptians, and while they may have known God and worshiped Him as well, they really didn't understand what it was like to be God's people. And they needed to learn, and they needed to drop some bad habits, and they needed to step into a new life. And so God really kind of held on to them and guided them and led them in wonderful ways throughout their wilderness journeys. But now they're about to go into the promised land. It's kind of time for them to grow up a little bit, you might say. To grow up and really let go of the bad habits and really understand this is how we live as God's people. And Moses is kind of preparing for them for this in his sermon here in Deuteronomy. But he starts out by reminding them of this, that it's all about God's love. That in love, God has made this covenant promise to them that they are His special people, that they are His children. They will be a kingdom of priests, a holy nation. And it's interesting that as he talks about all of this in this covenant at Mount Sinai, he says it wasn't with your fathers, it wasn't with those, the older generation that are no longer with us that He made the covenant, it's with you. But it's worth remembering this, that it's been 40 plus years since that day those days on Sinai. And it was 40 years for a reason, is because the adult males in particular had chosen not to go into the promised land, and so God said, well, then you're not going to go at all, and you're going to wander for 40 years until all of you that made this decision have died off. 40 years. So when Moses is talking to these people, and he says, God made this covenant with you, many of them weren't even alive when the covenant was made. Many of them were children, so they weren't really part of that whole process. But Moses is making a point here, that when God makes a covenant with your fathers, He's making it for all generations. This covenant is real and it is yours. And He tells them this story to help them to feel like they were truly present in the midst as God makes this great covenant. And He says this, and God said, I am the Lord who brought you out of the house of slavery. I am the God who has committed Himself to you for your good as my special people, my loved children. This is the covenant that I have made with you. Now, there was even a covenant behind the covenant. All the way back to Abraham, when God chose Abraham and He covenanted with Abraham and said, I'm going to make of you a great nation. Well, these are the people that He was talking about. And He says, and that nation is going to bless the entire world. This is the promise that God has made. And He says more to Abraham. He says, and this land that you're wandering in right now of Canaan, it will be the place where your people will live. They will have it. They will possess it for their own. And that's where they will become this great nation. And so all of that is the background for the covenant at Sinai, and it is renewed through Moses and the people. And Moses is actually now preparing them for the fulfillment of this as they step into the promised land and see, as God has said, what the mighty things, the awesome work that He will do for them. Now, when we think about God's covenant, there's a couple of things we need to remember. Some of the aspects of God's promises of His covenant are all one-sided. All on God. God chose Abraham and his descendants, not because there was anything particularly worthy about him. He makes a point to say that a number of times. God just decided. He chose. He made a promise. He promised that He would be their God and they would be His chosen people no matter what. One-sided, all on God. He made them His people. He saved them from slavery, not because they had been good people, they'd been following Him closely, but simply because it was a promise that He made, and He was following up on the promise. And He would bring them into the promised land, not because they had been following His will so wonderfully in the wilderness. If you look at the story, they didn't do a very good job at all. It was one-sided. It was all on God. He made a covenant promise, and it was going to happen. However, as with covenants, there was also an expected response from the people. It was expected that they would respond to this covenant grace, this covenant love of God, by loving Him back, by showing Him honor and respect. And that would only be appropriate, right, after all that He has done and continues to do for them. And in fact, the people of Israel were told that if you want to live in this land and prosper and do well and stay here, you are going to need to trust in God and God alone. And you're going to need to learn to follow the ways of God. And Moses once again reminds the people that he's talking to now that you have made a promise, he said. Mostly it was their parents that made the promise, but there's this corporate connection. He says, you have made this promise. When the people responded, we will do everything the Lord has said. And you know what? In Exodus, when it happened, they didn't just do it once. They said it 3 different times. We will do everything that the Lord has said. And God's response to that? Oh, that they would have such a heart as this always. That their hearts would be connected to me, that they would want to do the will all of my commandments always, and so that it would go well with them. That is always God's heart for his people, that it would go well with them. The commandments are about his heart for his people, for their blessing. And now here in Deuteronomy, then Moses reminds the people of what I would say the most significant things that God wanted them to remember of what's it like to be my people, to follow in my ways. What are we talking about here? We've heard them as the 10 Commandments. The Jewish people would call them the 10 words of God. I want to call them the Big 10 today because there are more laws that God gives, but he leads with these and he says, this is it. This is how it looks to be my people. This is how it looks to live in covenant blessing with me and with each other. It will be a path for you. He says, you'll walk in all the way that the Lord your God has commanded. Walking, it's this idea of everyday life, everything that you do. That my covenant grace would be so steeped in you that it will be part of who you are and all that you do, and therefore you will walk in my ways in all that you do. Why? So that it will go well with you. The covenant is good. It's filled with grace, not just the promise part, but also the laws themselves. They are good. They are meant for the good of the people. Like a father who's instructing his children, this is what's going to give your life meaning and help you be blessed and feel secure. I want to look at those commandments. I want to walk through them real quickly with just a little bit of commentary. But this is the lead. This is the lead. I am the Lord your God who has saved you and who has loved you and made you a wonderful people, and I will continue to be with you. This is what it looks like to live as my people. Now, a little kind of side excursus. If you didn't grow up Lutheran, you might notice that Lutherans and people, our Reformed friends, we divide out the 10 Commandments a little differently. So Lutherans, we have only one command that ties together with no other gods, and 2 for the coveting, and our Reformed friends do it the opposite way, which is kind of interesting, just to point that out. The Jewish folks, they call this the 10 words, not the commandments. And in my understanding, I forgot to look this up again, but my understanding is that God doesn't start out with any of those 10 commandments, what we call the commandments, that the first word, as I understand it, is I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the house of slavery. He starts it all off with the first word, reminding them of how much he loves them and what he has done for them. And then it flows from there. But let's take a look at these. You shall have no other gods. We would include no graven images. Don't make any idols. The covenant path of life begins with this understanding, the realization of this truth. There is only one true God who created all, one who saved us. And when we're tempted to put anything, our love, our trust, our hopes in anything else, it only causes trouble. 2 more commandments that flesh out how we live with God a bit more. Do not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. And now, the Lord there is actually the word for Yahweh, the very specific name that God gave to Moses to share with his people. And he's kind of saying this. He said, I've lifted you up. I've made you my people. I have really put my name on you. You are representing me. And it's not just about how you use the name and speaking my name. It's your life. that you would live in such a way that would not cheapen or empty the respect and the honor, the holiness that my name deserves. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. God set aside this specific day to be His, but also for us. A day to remember what He has done, how He has rescued, and how He provides. A day to remember that your life does not depend on your work, but on the love and the work of God in your life. And then the rest of the commandments deal with how God's people are called to live with each other. Some of them seem more straightforward than others. Honor your father and mother. That seems pretty straightforward. This relationship is cornerstone to our relationships, and he says this is so important. Now, I know that sometimes it's not always easy as we get older to understand how we best do that, or as our parents get older, how to best do that. But so important, God says. Do not kill other people. Do not commit adultery. Keep the act of sex pure and holy as God intended. God's message has always been that should be reserved for a husband and a wife in a committed marriage relationship. Don't steal from others. Don't lie to or about someone. Don't covet anything that is your neighbor's. That's how we'll look at that one. Don't covet anything that's your neighbor's. It doesn't belong to you. God has chosen not to give that to you. I think this is one of the more nebulous commandments of deciding, have I crossed the line or not? But at the center of this commandment is our heart. Whether or not we are content in trusting God in what He blesses us with. Because when we start trusting God only based on what we think we should have, or when we start questioning God because we compare our blessings to someone else, it only leads to heartache. Not always easy to know when we cross the line, but it is worth regular and honest reflection to guard ourselves against this sin. All right, pretty quickly. There's the Big Ten, right? So important to God that they're literally written in stone. Literally. And it's the expected response of those who have been saved by God, those that love Him, to live accordingly. But we said that in this series of Deuteronomy that we're looking for the gospel, we're looking for the grace of God in Deuteronomy, right? So what do you do? How do you find grace in all these do's and don'ts? Well, honestly, if you've grown up Lutheran, it's a little tough. Because I was always taught, well, what is the most important use of the law of God is to show me my sin, which is true. Because when I look at the laws of God, I go, I'm blowing it, right? And it leads me to know I need God's forgiveness. But I think that it's so important that we remember that as Lutherans talk about it, there's another use of the law as a guide and as a rule to follow. Those who have been redeemed, we recognize that we're not earning anything by it. We're simply responding to God's love. And we can really take our cue from the people of the Old Testament, the writers. To begin with, the Old Testament writers, they didn't look at God's law as something that constrained them. They didn't look at God's law as something that was holding them back from enjoying life. On the contrary, they looked at God's law as life-giving, as making all the difference of really living life to the full. Last week in Deuteronomy chapter 4, we read this comment from Moses. I want to bring it back. He says, "And what great nation is there that has statutes and rules so righteous as all this law that I have set before you today?" The law is righteous and good, he says. It's a wonderful thing. He says, we are amazed because we have a God who loves us so much that He's revealing this truth to us of the best way to live. And the Psalms are filled with joy. Sometimes I'm amazed at how the psalmists have so much joy that they can write about the instructions that God gives us, the laws to follow. They compare it to the most beautiful and precious things that they have in their life. It's more pure gold in the sweetness of the honeycomb. The refreshment, the life-giving quality of water itself in a dry land. Light in the blessing of being able to see and know where we're going and what we're doing. One of my favorite Psalms, Psalm 19, here's one little snippet from it. The fear of the Lord I'll read it from the way you have it on the screen. The decrees of the Lord are firm, and all of them are righteous. They are more precious than gold, than much pure gold. They are sweeter than honey from the honeycomb. And by them your servant is warned, and in keeping them there is great reward. See, the prophets, The psalmists, they understood this, that if God created the world, if he created us and put us in this world, in this universe, and he created it all, he probably knows how it's supposed to work, right? So his wisdom is worth following. His wisdom is worth listening to. His way is worth following. And that ultimately, in laying out these instructions for life, he is doing a good thing for us. With his laws, with his instructions, see, God is trying to provide for us the good, and he's trying to protect us from the evil. That's God's plan always for his people, to provide for us and to protect us. And if we really look at it, that's how we see grace in the law of God. Now would be a great time, I think, for us to do that today, to look at each of those commandments and see how is God providing, how is he protecting. But actually what I want to do is I want to challenge all of you to do that on your own. And that's actually one of the day's readings and questions is to do that. I think we all should be doing this. So I'm going to ask you to do that. Spend some time. Look at each commandment. How is God protecting us? How is he providing for us? Or another way to put it, that is what good happens to people in the world if God's people would follow these commandments? And what not so good things happen if we don't? Now, the truth is this, that in spite of it being God's expectations, even in spite of us knowing that his instructions for life are good, we all struggle. We all struggle with them, each in our own ways, right? Each of us have our own difficulties, and we all fall short. And if we're honest, we recognize that when we do that, it hurts our relationship with God. It can hurt our relationship with other people around us. And the truth is that it can even mess us up on the inside because it can hurt how we understand, how we think, how we feel about ourselves. And sin has this amazing power to take hold over us. But God knows that. That's why it's always been his gracious plan to provide a way out when we don't follow his way. To provide that path of forgiveness, that path of freedom. And that's why Jesus, the Son of God, came into the world. Because he knew that even his own chosen people could not and would not follow the righteous path of life. He came to set people free from slavery. Not the physical and emotional bondage like the Israelites had in Egypt, but freedom from slavery to worse powers, stronger powers, greater powers of sin and death and eternal damnation. That's why Jesus came. He came to make covenant with us, this promise of God's grace with us. But in so doing, he did a couple of other things as well. He came and he taught us the significance of God's law in our lives. He taught a lot about that in the Gospels, about what it truly means in our hearts to love God and to follow him. And he showed us what it looks like in a life to live it out. God's law was so important to Jesus. Listen to what he said. He said, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished." Jesus came to make a new covenant with us, and he did that by fulfilling the original covenants. That is, to do what sinful people couldn't do, to follow God's law, to live that perfect life, and then to offer back that perfect life as an atonement for our sin, our breaking of the law, to set us free from the house of slavery that our sin has put us in. And now you see, like the people of Israel in Deuteronomy, God says the same things to us. He says, "I am your God who brought you out of that slavery. I am the God who has saved you. I am the God who loves you. I have made you my very own by my grace, and that cannot be taken away from you." The Apostle Peter echoes the same words that God says about the people of Israel to us who are in Christ today. Speaking to you and to me, "You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light." Stop for a moment That's a way of saying that you would live according to his ways, that others would see in you the salvation that God has made for you, that they would come to see a holy God through you. Once you were not a people, but now you are a people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Jesus fulfilled the law for us to save us. He made new covenant with us, a covenant of eternal grace that we now live in, that will usher us into his glorious kingdom. He set us free to bring us back into that blessed relationship with God our Father. But he also fulfilled the law to show us how significant and wonderful it can be in our lives. Not to save us, not to do good enough that somehow we please God and make him happy and that make ourselves worthy, but simply to respond to his gracious covenant of love to us. The law of God is still a path for us, a path of the redeemed people of God. It doesn't constrain us, or it doesn't take the joy out of life, but it opens us up to a greater fulfillment of life. It still leads to greater peace and to greater joy as we follow in the footsteps of our Savior. God is committed to you, to me, to all who would believe into his eternal covenant of grace, and he's shown us how we can best live within it. And he asks for a response, to love him back, to recognize that his laws are good and wonderful, and they bring good to us and to the world, to remember his laws, to commit to his laws, and to enjoy the blessing of walking with him in his way. And to that end, I would invite you to join with me to make a commitment, a recommitment, if you will, to respond to the God of grace, the God of the covenant that we have in the blood of Jesus Christ, that we will follow him according to his ways. I invite you to recite these commandments with me as that kind of commitment, as they're written. Would you join me, please? You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. You shall not covet your neighbor's house, his field, or anything that is your neighbor's. Dear Lord, may it be true in us. Amen.